So perhaps you've got some close people around you pointing some action tendencies, some behaviors, and it just doesn't make sense. But they're pointing out things that don't feel good. They don't set really well with your heart, but people near and dear to you keep pointing them out. And maybe you've lost a sense of self-awareness, or maybe an inability to hold yourself accountable or allow yourself to be accountable to others, and what are the costs of lack of self-awareness and accountability? Well, today we're going to talk about that very topic together as we learn how to remove those stumbling blocks in our life. Welcome to Hope and Recovery, a Fellowship Celebrate Recovery podcast that shares hope and healing for our mental, spiritual, emotional, and relational journey through life-change stories and recovery topics, all centered around Jesus Christ and the Beatitudes of Matthew chapter 5, and the Celebrate Recovery principles that help us to face our hurts, hang-ups, and habits and our broken relationships so that we can, through Christ, find purpose in our pain and walk that path that He desires for us in our life and not stay stuck with those compulsive behaviors, those numbing agents that may be keeping us from walking the fullness of life. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I struggle with drugs and alcohol and perfectionism. My name is Rodney. I'm one of the pastors and Celebrate Recovery leaders here at Fellowship Bible Church, Celebrate Recovery in Rogers. And so good to be with you today. Hey, thanks for giving us a 5-star review and a rating on wherever you listen to this podcast. And by the way, we are on YouTube as well if you want to check us out there, if you prefer to listen there. But thanks as always for helping get the word out so that we can, in the podcast arena, reach more people to bring hope to them. As I was mentioning in the intro, self-awareness, why is that so critical? Why is that such an important part? You know, when I think about how this scenario tends to be the case. We will find ourselves where we have this armor around our face. You can call it a mask, but it's really a thick armor, and it's the wrong kind of armor to be wearing. But we want everyone to believe that we are what we're not. And here's the interesting thing. A lot of times when we have some stuff going on, we may think that we've got people fooled, but our action tendencies, our behaviors are saying something different. and here's what the lie we can believe. Well, nobody said anything, so I must have them fooled. 9 times out of 10, it's probably because they're afraid to say something, because they're afraid of the reaction they're going to get out of you. And so if I say this is going to blow up. So what do? They just kind of keep it to themselves. And then the cycle continues. The person that's not really self-aware and thinks they're doing a good job of hiding it, or maybe is so deep in denial they don't see it as an issue. And, that whole I can quit doing that anytime I want, fill in the blank. I'm just choosing to be this way. It's not hurting anybody. The self-awareness piece is so critical because there is cracks in our armor. And by the way, it is seen by the others in our life. They're just not acknowledging. They're not saying it. So what do? We keep wearing the mask. We keep trying to muddle through life. Meanwhile, seeing these cracks in our armor. In fact, sometimes when I think about parts of my story, it's like, man, if I could go back in time, almost feeling a little bit embarrassed. Man, I thought I was fooling people around me so well. And people knew. They just weren't saying anything. I had a total lack of self-awareness, and it had become a big stumbling block for me in my own healing and growth process and the recovery process. And so when we lack self-awareness, it becomes a pretty big liability for us. And so self-awareness in short is just really being able to look at, and this is a good, if you're in a place and you're wondering, this is why accountability is so important. By the way, I've said this before, it bears repeating. No one can hold me accountable, but I can give people permission. And this is such a good question. I don't care if you've been in recovery one day or 40 years. It's good to have people around us that we trust, that will speak straight with us, that if we went to them and said, hey, have you noticed anything different in me? Is there anything that you see that needs attention? Are there any action tendencies that have gotten out of balance here? Would you, if you see anything, please tell me. And if you don't right now, I'm going to give you permission to tell me, because it's so important to go to those people, because that we know we can trust, that will speak straight to us. If you don't have those kind of people around you, can I encourage you to make that a goal in the next 30 days, 1 or 2 people to start out with. If you can get 5 core people around you, I think that's a good round number. There's no scientific evidence of that. I think it's just a good number, to 5 people that know my full story, know my tendencies, and are willing to speak into my, not to judge me, not to fix me, but to be very honest and say, hey, what's going on, buddy? This is out of character. Is this one of those times you're kind of struggling? I'm seeing some things out of you that I haven't seen in a while, and I'm just concerned for you. What's going on? That can be embarrassing and hurtful to hear, but man, aren't you glad that people have the willingness to say that before it becomes a catastrophe? But we have it's a good indication if you're hearing from people in your life and they're saying things that don't make sense to you, but you keep hearing those same things from multiple people and these people that you love and care about, at least be curious, even if it doesn't make sense and it seems absurd. At least be curious to at least stop and go, is there some truth in this? And I wonder why people I love and care about keep saying the same thing. Now, what would be an example of that? Where we're seeing shortness or anger, or just a very low tolerance for crisis or situations that are popping up, and the action tendencies are unhealthy, and we're lashing out at people, or maybe we're disconnecting and we're tending to isolate, whatever that is. Sometimes our best gauge is the people around us. Hey, tell me why you're saying that. When you ask me, are you okay? Something seems different. Something seems off. That's out of character. I trust you, and I know that you'll do it with gentleness and respect. What are you seeing in me? Because here's the thing. If we don't have people that are willing to speak into that, then we're going to keep being in this place of denial, and our self-awareness is going to be in the toilet. And so I want to recognize and acknowledge my own behaviors. And sometimes those patterns that I might have developed can be brought to my attention from those who love and care about me. See, if I don't give somebody permission to hold me accountable, self-awareness may not ever happen, because we've built up a facade that I'm good, everyone else is crazy. Nothing is wrong with me. These people are just oversensitive. Why do they keep bringing this up? It's just a bunch of nonsense, right? So we kind of find ourselves in this kind of out of balance situation. So it can become a stumbling block, and without recognizing and even acknowledging, and those are 2 things that have to happen. Recognize it, I see it, and then acknowledge it. Something is off here, and I need to own that. So if we don't recognize and acknowledge our behaviors, or maybe some triggers, maybe there's some things that keep happening, that kind of push some buttons, and it's like, where did that come from? Part of our self-awareness is coming from others. Some of it is just checking in with our own heart. Do I like what comes out of me when certain things happen? We call them triggers, things that kind of push our buttons that can create this response, or these patterns that need to be addressed. It's like, where did that come from? if you find yourself, this is why heart checks are so important. I want to stop and kind of acknowledge what's going on with me and in my heart. Where did that come from? And is there some lies that I'm believing? Did something happen that I'm trying to ignore? Is there something that I shoved down and I'm avoiding? I said this on a prior podcast, but we kind of fall in these two ditches of avoidance or indulgence, right? And we avoid at all costs. And here's the thing: when we avoid, and we don't, become self-aware, or we don't have accountability around us to be willing to speak, that pain will hunt us down like a pack of wild wolves, wild dogs. It will hunt us down. And so when we don't recognize and acknowledge, it becomes challenging for us to have meaningful change in our life. If we don't acknowledge, if we don't recognize, why would we ever do anything differently? Change is not going to happen. If I don't recognize the check engine light has come on, why would I ever pop the hood? I don't just pop the hood randomly. But if I'm looking at the signals that say, hey, something's off, and sometimes those check engine lights are from people closest to us. If someone that loves me and cares for me, and I know they love and care for me through experience, and they say something, are you okay? Instead of just, well, of course I'm fine. Why? That's silly. Why would you ask that? Of course, I'm just having a bad day, whatever. I want to at least kind of lean into that and say, hey, what did you see? And then my heart check is kind of stopping and kind of leaning into that. Where's that anger coming from? Where's that shortness coming from? Why am I pulling away from people? And of course, then we have the big coping numbing agents. Like, why do I keep running to this as an addiction? Or why does this issue keep coming up? So if I don't have a self-awareness, meaningful change will not happen. And it becomes a stumbling block. And so I want to lean into that so I can ultimately experience the healing path that Christ has for me in my life. And sometimes others can be a part of that process. Sometimes it's just us being honest about what we're seeing and leaning into that so we can get the fullness of self-awareness. So I'm going to take a super quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation around self-awareness. Hey friends, we just always know that someone may be listening that maybe is struggling and needing some help. If you're struggling and you're in a place of you've got some behaviors and you just don't know how to stop, if you could have stopped, you would have already done it. Maybe you need some help. Maybe it's a habit. Maybe it's a struggle, a compulsive behavior, a character defect that's kind of hurting the relationships around you. We just want to encourage you, come join us on a Friday night. This is a space where we can bring any, all hurts, hangups, and habits. We're on Fellowship Fayetteville, Celebrate Recovery, and Fellowship Rogers Celebrate Recovery. 6 p.m. for Connection Cafe meal, and our main meeting starts at 7. Also, we've got some great meetings in Northwest Arkansas. I know they'd love to have you. For a full list and more information about our Celebrate Recovery, go to fellowshipcr.org. We hope you'll join us this week. Continue the conversation around self-awareness. And, it's interesting, kind of chuckle at this, that self-awareness, when we finally come into the reality of what is, and that's the thing, reality is just what is. And sometimes our own self-awareness is not facing reality. That's why we call it denial. Reality is just what is. Pain is what happens when we bump into reality. And that's the thing, when we hear from others, or maybe we acknowledge the action tendencies that are in front of us that can be painful because we're bumping into reality. But it's better to bump into reality rather than living in denial. And so self-awareness, allowing it allows us to understand the root cause of why I'm seeing what I'm seeing. the action tendencies, the behaviors, maybe the addictions, the issues, the compulsive behaviors, the character defects. And accountability, as I mentioned before the break, ensures that we take responsibility for those action tendencies, those compulsive behaviors or character defects, and fully commit to the recovery process. I was meeting with some residents here locally, and we were walking through life-sealing choices, and we were on the choice number 3, consciously choose to commit. Another word you could use for commit is to decide, to cut off all other options. There is no plan B. And when we do that, we're cutting off all those other options. We're committing fully to the recovery process. And it's easy to kind of stay in that place of denial. But when we allow people to speak into those spaces, it's about fully committing to decide, hey, I'm going all in on this. And yes, it's painful. Yes, it can be scary, but it's much better to face those giants in front of us rather than letting the enemy convince us to stay in this place of slavery, in hiding and isolation. It's because here's what happens when we don't have a self-awareness. If we don't have an accountability, what we end up doing is we stay stuck in this blame cycle. And I mentioned this at the summit, but blame in the moment can become an inability, you could say, to be held accountable for a lifetime. We lose the ability to fall under the authority of anyone apart from ourselves. And that is scary because principle 1 is all about being accountable to a higher power and allowing ourselves to be accountable to those that God puts in our life in that spiritual path in this recovery process. So when we don't have self-awareness, when we don't have accountability, then we fall into this blame game. We get stuck in this place of blame, and we just finger point to everyone else. And it's learning how to let go of our need to hold up the heavy mask. We're putting it up there at all costs. And some of us in that trying to protect our image, again, we think we're doing better than we are. People see and they're going, that dude's got a lot of cracks in his armor and he actually thinks he's hiding it well, but I just don't know how to tell him, and he'll probably react and get short with me, maybe blow up me. I'm just not going to say anything. And again, we start thinking, well, man, I'm doing a good job hiding this. And the reality is we're doing a terrible job hiding it, but we build this false version of ourselves, and some of us will spend a lifetime building this false version of ourselves, and we would rather someone love the false version of ourselves than to be seen as the real version of ourselves. The problem with that is we're not receiving because we no one's seeing the real us. They're loving the mask. They're not loving us. And if I'm not taking it in, how am I ever going to be able to fully dish it out in a healthy way to be that true fruit of the Spirit? It's manufactured plastic fruit that just doesn't taste like the real thing. It looks pretty on the outside, but when you bite into it, it's just a big old ball of hard wax, and it's disgusting. You're spitting it out, and you can't swallow it. It's bad for the digestive system. And so that blame game, right? We're just trying to point fingers. When in recovery, we talk about accuse others, excuse ourselves, and guys, this can lead to other issues. Again, we think we're managing our struggles, but it can create issues for us and the others in that hurts, hangups, and habits, and others pays a price. It can create issues for other people. It can hinder us from moving forward. I shared this story in Life Sealing Choices, but if you've ever been to a beach and you try to hold a beach ball under the water, you can do it for a while, but eventually it's going to become too much. And here's the problem. Even if you're doing a good job hiding it under the water, you're stuck holding it under the water. I can't move forward. It hinders me from progress in my life because I'm holding this beach ball under the water. Why? Because I don't want you to see the real thing that I'm carrying. It's like, okay, well, that's great. But guess what? You're still stuck holding it under the water. You're stuck in the same space, and everyone else is moving forward and growing in the recovery process. So it's hindering you from true maturation, from true growth, from true progress. And so as long as I'm trying to hold that beach ball under the water, I'm not experiencing healing and growth. And the enemy convinces us in this space, man, this is better. If anybody sees you in this space, the shame just comes online. If anybody sees you, they're going to leave you. You may die. And even saying that loud, it's like, no, that wouldn't happen. But when we're in the middle of it, we believe lies like that. No, I'll die if anybody sees me in this space. I'm not going to let anyone see this. I'm going to keep holding up my cracked up mask. I'm going to keep holding this beach ball under the water and just hope that I can do it for a lifetime. The problem is life doesn't stand still. The waters start getting rough sometimes because we live in a broken world. We have relational struggles. And the first time somebody lets me down, or there's a disappointment, or this feeling of rejection or abandonment, all that stuff comes forward. And the strength that we had to hold that beach ball under the water is no longer sustainable. And guess what? That ball is going to come crashing up. That's been held under the pressure of that wave, that water. It always, when we let go of it, it comes shooting up, and it will hit me in the face, but it'll hit anybody in close proximity in the face, as opposed to slowly letting that thing up and let the pressure of holding it under the water come up and allowing others into that. Maybe I invite a brother to place his hands on the beach ball, and let's slowly bring this up back to the surface. Together, I'm not trying to hold it under my own power. And God, I need your help. We start bringing it to the surface, and we look at it and we say, ugh. True self-awareness says, this is what it is. That's that word confess, right? It's saying the same thing. That's what it means in the original language of the Greek, to say the same thing. And it's basically just knowing God knows what is true. He knows what's hiding behind the mask. And we're just coming to agreement and acknowledging it, to recognize it, to call it out, and have that self-awareness to say, this is the way it is. And these action tendencies are an indicator. And I may not have the answer why they're there right now, but at least I'm acknowledging, I have the self-awareness that to acknowledge it's there. And that's why accountability is so important. Again, I don't want to put it on other people to work my recovery. It's like, you're my accountability partner, work my recovery. No, the accountability is to reveal things. We're trusting them to reveal things and kind of give me a jab in the side when they see me getting off track. If I'm driving down a road and you're with me and you see me nodding off and you don't say anything, that's going to be bad for you, and it's going to be bad for the person in the passenger seat. It's going to be bad for anyone else on the road. I need you to kind of give me a jab, maybe even get my attention, say something. And that's the thing with accountability. It's just someone that's willing to be with us, and when they see us getting off track, it's not their job to take the wheel and drive, but they may get your attention. And hey, if you're not going to be willing to listen to me, I'm going to go ahead and get out of the truck, and you're on your own. And then we'll let other authorities take part in holding you accountable because you have an unwillingness or a lack of self-awareness and a willing to be held accountable in that space. If we're not willing to do that and let other people speak into that, we're going to keep driving off the road. At some point after this, I can deny it and say, I didn't nod off. You're crazy. I would never sleep while I'm driving, right? Just denial. At some point, if everyone keeps telling me that and I keep getting pulled over for driving over the line and swerving because I keep sleeping, at some point I have to say, you know what? Consider the possibility. Could I be curious of the possibility that what they're saying is actually true? And these are people who love and care for me. Maybe I need to take that in before I end up killing somebody or killing myself and hurting a lot of people along the way. So lack of self-awareness, lack of accountability can become a big stumbling block for the healing and growth process in this recovery process we call Celebrate Recovery. I need that self-awareness. I need accountability. By the way, you need accountability too. And if there are things happening around you and people keep telling you about these and you keep ignoring it, it's just going to get worse. And life is going to pass you by. And when the waters get rough, it's just a matter of time. The cracks in the armor will drop that mask. We either become self-aware or we're made aware. And sometimes when we're made aware, it's much more painful than the fear that we had of being seen and building these false versions of ourselves. It's much more painful than if we just acknowledge it, let the beach ball up with the help of brothers and God, and take the mask off and say, this is who I am. And these action tendencies are not acceptable. I'm going to choose to allow myself to be accountable to God and to others and stop blaming, stop hindering my growth process, and so that I can ultimately deal with the behaviors, the addictions, the compulsive behaviors, the character defects, whatever that is, as I become this space of recognizing, acknowledging that as I invite others into that space. So hopefully that's just a little nugget for you in your week to kind of get you something to chew on. Maybe you've been in recovery a long time and there's something, hey, is there anything going on? Maybe it's a good opportunity to circle back with your accountability partners and your sponsors. Say, hey, is there anything that you're seeing that I've got some blinders up on? I trust you and I'd love for you to let me know. Oh, no, I don't see anything. Okay. If you do, can you promise me that you'll bring it to my attention? Or maybe you're early in this process, you're not in recovery, and people are saying things. Maybe you've gotten a couple tickets, and you're convinced that the law is against me kind of thing. Maybe there's something to be curious about. Maybe there's some awareness that you're lacking, some self-awareness. Are you accountable? Maybe you need to consider that some of the action tendencies that you're seeing, some things, the ditches you keep falling into, are indicators that maybe there's some pain I'm avoiding. Maybe there's some behaviors that are indicating some pain underneath the surface that needs to be addressed. So I hope this has blessed your heart. It's always good to have some nuggets to chew on to get us through the week, and maybe there's some things that kind of reared their ugly head. By the way, if something is revealed new and you've been in recovery a while, no shame there. We're lifelong learners in this sanctification process we call recovery. You just keep going and just pay attention, have self-awareness when those things pop up. Let yourself be accountable, and God will do the healing. We get the gift of His help, and He desires to do that for you in your life if you'll just trust Him with that. I hope these bless your heart. As always, we're looking for topic ideas. Don't be afraid to send those in. We would love to hear from you. And again, thanks for leaving a review, a 5-star rating. It helps us to reach more people. Hey, thanks so much for being with me today, and I pray that you'll join me next time. Until then, God bless you guys.